everyone. Welcome to the Hoggin podcast. This morning, I had no idea that I'd be sitting next to Chuck Todd, a longtime political journalist and 9-year host of NBC's Meet the Press.
A big suey to you.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, is there anything that you feel like I might have missed in that introduction?
No, I think that's all. I'm all good with that.
Okay, so I know earlier you were talking about how people who kind of live in the mainstream media world, who are constantly around the things of politics and news, they find themselves, or you perceive them to be maybe not very happy. They're always living in a negative space because that world is full of negativity.
It's very negative right now. Yes. I mean, the news isn't. We used to joke that there's never. It's not breaking news like another plane lands safely at the airport. Yeah. News at 11, right? Unfortunately, in the news business, right, it is contentious news or bad news is contentious information or bad information. I should separate that out. Usually filters up into a newscast, right? It's considered, hey, we got this new divide or we got this new problem, right? It's never rarely do we say, hey, we really solved the water crisis today, right? Yeah. Like type of thing. Yeah. So, and I think what happened was, while the news is, in general, it's like, of course it's, when you're in the news business, you're gonna do all sorts of things. I think the current political environment where we sort of weaponized social media and weaponized where people actively try to undermine journalists, like try to undermine their credibility, not almost on purpose, on purpose. And I always said that the problem was, if you attack a politician that way, they have their own media consultant and their campaign and communications team, and they can quote fire back. Right? This was asymmetric warfare. Yeah. Right. Notice in the war zone right now in Israel and Gaza, you see all these reporters wearing press, right? Because that means, hey, don't shoot. Yeah. Right. Yeah. We're just armed with pencils. That's how I've always, and all of a sudden the politicians are shooting at us. Yeah. And I thought, whoa, we're wearing the press flag. And then it puts you in this weird position. If you defend yourself, then all of a sudden, because you're defending yourself against somebody who's thought of as a partisan, are you being a partisan by defending yourself, or are you just defending your work? Yeah. Right? Yeah. And it really put like, if you were raised of sort of this mindset of, hey, I'm the the first rule of journalism is to observe, right? And you observe and report, right? I viewed myself truly dispassionately that way. Yeah. It's been for older journalists like myself, the last 10 years have been just a change in the dynamic. Yeah. And it's so different. And I think that's why when you say, look, 9 years was enough. Yeah. Like it just, and I'm not going to sit here and say, I loved it. Yeah. But it takes a toll. Yeah. And it's easy for me to say, hey, grow a thick skin, block it out when you can't. Well, I did it. You compartmentalize until you can't. Or until you fear that you're going to get too cynical. Yeah. So that was the line that I drew. I think this just, this is where I feel like the politicians are almost pitting us against each other unfairly. They really have pit the country against each other. And it really is a small group of pot stirrers. Yeah. Yeah. So how did you keep a positive outlook while you were in the midst of that? So what I used to say is, let's be in the solutions business, right? I say that now. I want to be in the solution. The way I'm trying to drift my podcast now, for instance, you want to talk about, you're trying to focus your podcast on, more sort of advice on how to do things better, right? I think when I was like, how do we? So if we're having a fight about the border, let's have a conversation about, okay, what kind of asylum system can we put in? Yeah. Right? Rather than trying to sit here and fact check everybody's talking point. Yeah. I think that we're so angry about the issue being portrayed unfairly by one side or the other. we actually forget what the actual topic's about.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the border is a perfect example. We're sitting here, okay, we all acknowledge it's an issue.
Yeah.
This is not a simple solution. If it was, we wouldn't be yelling about it.
Uh-huh.
Can we turn down the volume? All right, we need asylum. Okay. We got a fentanyl issue.
Yep.
Is it here? Okay. We've got this export issue here in China. You know, like, can we turn down the temperature?
Yeah.
And so, look, a Sunday morning program has an easier time to do that than cable news, right? And unfortunately, sometimes what draws viewers and the way how it should be and what draws viewers are not the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then my other question I had was, you know, you've interviewed many of the most prominent figures in the world. What is your interview preparation? What does that look like?
So I like to try to, so for politicians, I want to know, but obviously you just try to read everything about them. But I always really want to know how they first got into office.
Okay.
About their very first campaign, and there's a reason. There's a specific reason for it. Most successful politicians, their first race is what I would call their cleanest race.
Okay.
It's the most unvarnished version of them that exists. They more than likely wrote their own speeches, or at least their first speech was. It's the one where you know exactly really what motivated them to get in, what was their driving thing. So I always it's you want to read everything you can, but specifically of a politician, I always want to know about that first campaign, the first time they went to run for office, even if they lost, because I think it gives you better insight what a motivation is. I remember it's one of my favorite. I used to do these series of exit interviews with retiring members of Congress.
Okay.
And I always liked, do you remember why you ran for office the first time? And I remember this one guy said, he goes, yeah, I was really upset about I ran for school board. He goes, I was really upset. My house, my kid was going to end up at this other high school. And I didn't like that. And you're like, it was like, yeah, okay. And he goes, and I got there and I ran and I won. And I realized the school board had no control over this whatsoever. Like he had, as much as he was mad about the new lines, he realized, oh, I ran for the wrong office.
Gotcha.
It turns out that this is over here. This was in the county.
Okay.
But it was one of those. But it made me respect to that. It was sort of their motive was pure. It's sort of why should people run? I don't like something that's happened in my neighborhood. Okay, instead of bitching and moaning about it, I'm going to actually,
do something.
Step up and try to do something.
Take responsibility for that.
So that's why I think that first office matters.
Okay.
The other thing that you want to do is, I'm a devil's advocate questioner.
Okay.
I believe in trying to both accept their premise and make them go further, and at the same time channel what the other side, whatever they, learn everything you know about their position, and then try to poke holes in it.
Yeah.
Because the more you try to poke holes in it, the better you'll find out whether they know their stuff or not, and whether they understand, and usually know pretty quickly whether they really know an issue or they've decided they want to make it they're bringing this issue up because they think it's good politics.
Yeah, yeah. And do you have time for one more?
Sure.
So what do you think has been the mainstream media's biggest flaw? I know you talked about this a little bit, but kind of in that division between like pitting people against each other. What do you think was maybe the original or the most important flaw that they committed or act?
Well, this is one of those things where I can go back 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 30, right? I think there's a lot, to me, an original sin was the decision to televise the O.J. Simpson trial.
Okay.
This is before you were born, but that was a moment when a news organization and many other news organizations decided this was the single most important thing happening in America. It certainly was the most interesting conversation that many Americans were having, but it was not the most important story in 1994. We had all sorts of issues going on in 1994, 1995, and yet when you send the message to the public that you've chosen to prioritize what's interesting to them as the lead news item every night. Yeah. And we did this for 6 straight months. And it's not, CNN televised the trial from beginning to ending, which I think in itself was a mistake.
Okay.
Court TV televised the trial, fine. Yeah. But you as a news organization, I view it as this: every news organization, every media entity, you make a commitment to. You make a pact with your viewers. You've made a decision what your podcast is going to be about.
Yeah.
Right. And certain people fit into it, certain people don't. You know, you make a compact with your viewers, or however you want the premise of your show, and you should live within that premise a little bit, and sort of always. And I think that if your premise is, I'm telling you the 10 most important items in the news today, then you should be always reporting about the 10 most important items.
Yeah.
No. We know that everybody's talking about the O.J. Simpson trial, so we're going to do more O.J. Simpson. The point is this: unfortunately, it turned out if you give the people what they want, they'll watch.
Yeah.
But what it did is it trained the executives to think, oh, then you can make money on the news.
Yeah.
You can't. That is a fundamental mistake.
Yeah.
It means you end up, in order to make money on the news, then your job is to make the news more interesting to
Yeah.
get people to watch. The minute you're trying to shape the news into narrative because it will draw a better audience, you're part of the problem. And look, there's a business, and this is where I'm not sure the for-profit model in journalism can hold it anymore. I just don't. I want to believe that it can, but if you do it in its raw, purely most capitalistic form, then actually MSNBC and Fox are more on the nose than us.
Yeah.
And that's something that's of concern to me. It's like, we got to figure out, there might be a better mousetrap here.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Hi, my friend. I will.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Suey, go Hogs.
Yes, sir.
All right.